I'm sort of old enough to have been involved right from the start of Chaplaincy Plus. I remember coming to a meeting and I think it was the inaugural meeting, and it was overwhelmingly different than here. It was very formal, and I was, at the time, I was working for Birmingham City Council, I was working in the education department, and I was leading some work that was pretty much on the edge of what was sort of easy for Christians to be involved in. I was involved in sex and relationships education and advising across the city about that work. And there were many times when I felt like my work was not really understood by my Christian community, my church community, and I was a bit out of my depth. I was ending up going all over the place representing Birmingham and finding that I really didn't have any support. So Chaplaincy Plus was a breath of fresh air, because here was an organisation that was about work life and supporting work life. So I received support from Chris and Claire. Those of you who've been involved for a long time will remember them. And then more recently, had been working on the Wellbeing Initiative with Steve, and also have spoken at City Women and been involved in that network. So it's a real privilege to be here tonight, and it's a little daunting to realise that just meeting with Jane means that you're going to end up being a trustee. So watch out. Yes. Just have a... There we go. This is what I'm going to talk about tonight. In about 2019, I think, towards the end of 2019 and the early in 2020, this was before lockdown, I had committed to writing a book. And the book was about taking the wisdom, the golden thread really, the wisdom from the Christian faith, my faith, and also weaving in the golden threads from leadership theories and change theories and organisational development, all of those things, many of which actually have their roots in, I think, probably biblical theology, even though they're not recognised. And so I was writing this book, and I thought, well, who's it for? Who am I writing for? They kept asking me, who's your audience? I thought, I really don't know. And then I realised that the audience that I had in mind were the Nehemiahs. They were the people who were rebuilding the walls, wherever they might be. And all of you are walls builders. Whatever you do, you look around you, I'm sure, and see things that are broken. And for many of you, that will be the thing that drives you. Going back to Nehemiah, he wept over the walls that he saw. I don't know whether you weep over the walls that you're faced with, but he wept. And he then did something about it. He gathered a team. Anybody who sort of looks at leadership will, from a Christian perspective, will often look at the way that Nehemiah led, because he led very strategically, but also from a place of humility and a place of prayer. And I was sort of thinking over the last 4 years now, what we've all experienced, and the just this sort of sense that in the pandemic something shifted in a seismic way, I think, that certainly has changed the way that we enact work. I don't know how many of you now work. Just hands up. Who works from home? If we were standing here in 2019, that wouldn't be the case, would it? It's been a massive change, and with that has come a change in the way that we interact with each other, for good and for bad. And as we were driving through, it took us about half an hour to get through the tunnel today. We were saying, yeah, there are some benefits from working from home, but actually there are also some huge negatives around isolation and around the way that we collaborate with each other. That are real challenges as we look into the future about what working life is. So basically, Nehemiah was motivated by the needs of people, and I think, I'm sure that you have sort of key needs that motivate you, that drive you, things that actually make your heart beat a little faster. And you might just want to think about what those are, if you can name them to yourself just for a moment. So, I realised that I'm now of an age where I can look back over my career and sort of think, gosh, what did I achieve? And what did I do? And I realised that most of the achievements that I have were purely about just showing up day in, day out and doing the job that was in front of me and trying to be salt and light where I was, being who God created me to be in the workplace and giving my strengths and my skills. But I think it's really quite important for all of us to actually acknowledge what it is that we're contributing to. And I just made a list. So this isn't about bigging myself up. This is about encouraging you to be thinking about, what is it that I'm doing? What am I contributing to in the work that I do? Because I am absolutely sure you are. One of the things I realised when I was doing the research for the book was that in terms of key motivators, making the world a better place is one of the top motivators for most people when they think about work. So, that sense that we're doing something. So some of my highlights were, first of all, I started off as a special school teacher, and I was working with young adults with learning difficulties, and our work was about giving them greater independence. And I look back on those days and think, actually, we were at the forefront of fighting to getting them into cinemas, getting wheelchairs into cinemas. Would you believe it? Now it's something that we do accept. I know we've still got a long way to go with some of those things. I then went on to working around personal health and social education and the curriculum, developing the curriculum. I became a school's consultant and then an advisor. And then across many years, I sort of contributed to the work around leadership and developing head teachers and supporting them, helping them to get mentors so that they could be more effective in the workplace. My last sort of, real job, as in 9 to 5 job, was I was Deputy Diocesan Director for Education for Coventry Diocese. And in that, we had 75 schools. They were like I go back to my class of youngsters. They were my class of youngsters. Those 75 schools, I knew so much about them. And it was a real joy to serve in that role. It was a privilege, not just to sort of help strategically set up the Multi-Academy Trust, but actually to know people and to be that listening ear sometimes that Sarah and her team are. I think, that sense of when you're going about your work, who are you encountering? How are you connecting with them? And how are you listening to them? By the time we'll drive now around the diocese sometimes. We're having to go down and up and down to Oxford sometimes, and we go to the edges of the diocese. And I sort of, as we go past the schools, I think, I wonder how that person is getting on. because I know their story. I know something about them. And, they became so really, as I say, privileged and treasured those memories. I've contributed to my church community. And I think for many of you, it's such a key part of your lives, not just work, but also the church community that you're part of. And now I'm hoping that I continue to contribute really to thought leadership, particularly around Christian leadership, which is what I'm absolutely passionate about. But again, I just go back to that sense of we are called to be salt and light wherever we are, and it's just about showing up day in, day out. So what's your wall? What's the thing that drives you, and where do you think you're making a difference, or that you would like to make a difference? I'm going to give you a few minutes. It's lovely that we can sit in a less formal setting here. So if you just spend a few minutes talking with the people at your table or around you, just answer those questions. What's your wall? Where's your wall? And where would you like to make a difference? Where do you see you're making a difference? Just by showing up day in, day out. It doesn't have to be, something mega. It is about just being you. I'm going to have to interrupt your conversations. It's always hard, isn't it, to once you've got people talking, to stop them. So just to remember that verse, those verses again. Again, this was on my, as well as the Nehemiah's. This has been one of the passages that has really stuck with me, and actually it's interesting. I think one of you mentioned it earlier around the work of Chaplaincy Plus and Salt and Light. I think that actually it is something that resonates with many of us. Recently, I've been working with Ian from St Peter's Trust Saltley, and I met him at a Christian Resources exhibition, and I sort of came up to him and said, are you interested in the concept of Nehemiah's? And because it was something that was very much on my heart at the time, as you have heard. And he said, yeah, actually, I really would be interested in having a further conversation. So we started to have conversations about how do we reach people who are in the workplace, to find out what their needs are, what support needs are. And it's really interesting because we have found it really difficult to get hold of people, to meet people face to face, which we thought we were going to have lots of focus groups, but actually the best thing that we've done is an online questionnaire which people have returned. So it's been quite hard, and I think one of the issues is that people, even though we know in every single church there are people who are working somewhere, we can't there's no one place where all these people gather. Except perhaps, maybe, one day, that's the vision for Chaplaincy Plus. Somewhere where there is a space where people do gather. So anyway, I thought we embarked on some research, really just to find out what people's needs were, and then perhaps to sort of steer for Ian, the funding priorities for reaching that group of people for the future, but also for me, just thinking coming out of writing the book, I was thinking, well, actually get out and do something with the Nehemiahs. Now you've written about it, it would be good to do it. So I'm going to just show you some of the things that you might be interested in, some of the things that we found out. So we had 30 responses, which actually we think is quite a success. having struggled really to identify people. And they were from those backgrounds. Can you see? Can you see? Yeah. And they basically, people who responded ranged from emerging leaders. Our focus is on leadership, but recognising that actually leadership, everybody has some sort of essence in their job, some sort of aspect of their work that is leadership, whatever you're doing. So the whole raft of leaders, right the way through from those who would count themselves as emerging, right through to executive leaders in senior positions. So this is what we found out. And I felt like this shouldn't really be a surprise, but so many people felt called in the work role that was maybe their primary calling after family and personal lives. That the way they saw themselves serving was through their work. Similarly, high numbers attended church, and more than not, people reported that they felt supported by their churches. The thing that really excited me was 100% felt that they were able to make a positive change of society. And Ian and I have had lots of conversations about civil society. How do we as Christians impact on the world in which we're operating? And particularly at the moment, you know, when I met with Jane, I think we'd had riots in Birmingham, haven't we? We'd had, and we were talking about walls crumbling down, and it was like, yeah, even on our streets in this wonderful city that has lived with its diversity and its huge issues around deprivation and the like. Even just looking around, we were thinking, oh my goodness, it is broken. What can we do? How do we serve? And you know, I guess there are people, Christians placed everywhere within this city and wider, who are serving and who are responding to make the world a better place. Yes. This was good. Somebody said this, and I felt that it was really good, that sense of, you know, being able to be totally embraced by church, the whole of that person, bringing all of it, the whole self into that space. And again, a lot of people had their prayer and pastoral support and a space for reflection. That sounding board, somewhere where they can just sort of ask questions, talk about their ideas. I don't know what your experience is, but I've been very fortunate in the church that I'm in that actually it is a church that supports people in the workplace. Not necessarily everybody understanding all the time what people do, but actually genuinely seeing the mission beyond the church walls. Sadly, that wasn't everybody's experience. Of those that said they didn't feel supported, those were some of the comments. And particularly the one around loneliness of leadership and loneliness in role. I think, again, when we start to think about how we're all working in a much more isolated way, it is astounding, really, isn't it? That sort of sense of potential sense of isolation. So we asked them what were their sources of support. Again, I'm just going to sort of stop and if you're thinking about support, and I think also with the glasses, the lenses of thinking about chaplaincy plus, it would be helpful just for you to have a conversation about, if you've been taking part in our research, And actually, it's not closed, and you still can. And there's some flyers over here if you'd like to. But if you'd been taking part, what would you have said about sources of support? Okay, I'm going to just move on. I'm watching the clock, and Jane's nodding at me, so she knows I'm watching the clock. So, I guess the sort of final thoughts I want to go back to are Nehemiah, because he didn't do it alone. And whatever it is, whatever your wall is, wherever you're serving, I don't believe you can do it alone. I think that is not the way we're designed to be as Christians. We are meant to be part of that wider body, and we strengthen each other. So he needed people with a multitude of skills. So it doesn't matter what your skills are. I'm sure there are places for you to serve. And he built teams, people working together. I think that's one of the things I've noticed recently, that how hard is it to build team when you're little squares on a screen? Yeah, I don't know how you're getting on with that, but it is much more challenging than being in the room with, well, sometimes actually it's quite nice, but it is more challenging in terms of interacting like that. He encouraged all to contribute, and he prayed about the work. And that focus, again, tonight we've had around really prayer underpinning the work that this charity does, but also that I know you do. And so just what do you need to do to rebuild the walls that are facing you